From the Ben Pixel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Phone Booth Fighting, a free weekly podcast covering the world of mixed martial arts and far, far beyond, with myself, Richard Hunter, and the two-time UFC heavyweight champion, current Bellator heavyweight. Your name is?
I'm Frank Mir.
I thought that was you. Frank Mir, still in the year 2019. And today, Frank, we have a couple of special guests with us. You will recognize the familiar face of pro wrestler Austin Aries over there to my right.
Hello.
Good to see you, Austin.
At this point, I don't think it's special anymore that I'm here. I appreciate you guys extending the invitation.
Keep bumming rides.
Yeah,
So
it's cool.
keep showing up.
You're special in a different way.
No, this is true.
That's right.
The R word. You
and
can't say that anymore.
And a new friend, Frank. I got to introduce you to UFC commentator Brendan Fitzgerald. Brendan, thanks for coming in studio.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Brendan and I kind of officially met a month or so back doing a tour of the new UFC Apex facility over there. But Brendan is UFC commentator. I guess first and foremost, your introduction to everybody was through Dana White's Contender series.
It was, yeah.
Right? That's the first thing you did.
Yeah, and we talked, and that's when they did the tour through the Apex with the local media.
Yeah.
And then they made all of us available for media, and Richard was the only one that wanted to talk to me.
No, was I the only?
Well, that day. I mean, I know it's a lot of
yeah.
local media. It wasn't MMA
Yeah.
media, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're kind of both.
Yeah.
So I was thankful. People were like, all right, here's your spot, Brendan. Here's where all the people can come over and talk to you. I was like, nobody's going to talk to me. Because I was in that world, like, as the local news.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to go and talk to the commentator. I'll talk to, like, Dana.
They didn't.
Sure.
Well,
If Dana was making himself available, you talk to Dana. That's what fits on the news.
They didn't do you any favors because what they did, you're right. I mean, obviously, Dana's not available every day. So if you do get an opportunity to talk to him, people are going to gravitate toward that. But they put him at the end of this gauntlet, and you were first on the gauntlet. So they literally made everybody parade by you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yeah.
No, it was fine. I kind of knew. I was like, hey, I know people tomorrow will want to talk to me, the MMA media, but like the local media, they don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I know how the local news business works. It's a half hour, 11 o'clock news tonight.
Yeah.
Who are you going to fit 25 seconds for, Dana or this guy you've never seen?
Well, see, that's
whatever.
That's where I come into play because I talk longer
there you
than
go.
25 seconds
That's
at
right.
a time.
And I got a spot on your podcast.
That's right.
Now I'm here in person. It's wonderful.
All right, Frank, we got to get a couple of plugs out of the way before we start talking fights, and we got a lot to get to in this episode. First of all, I want to mention our Patreon page, patreon.com/phone booth fighting. We haven't mentioned this in a while, but we're breathing a lot of new life into this thing, Frank. For just $1 a month, $1 a month, you heard me right, you now get access to exclusive bonus content, which includes extra content from each episode that we record before and after the show goes live. Also, right now, we've got 2 full-length 90-minute video specials up there that we taped at the Laugh Factory in Chicago with Big John McCarthy and the LA Comedy Club here in Las Vegas with Chael Sonnen. You also get full-length video of our interview with Billy Bob Thornton we taped in his hotel room, and our interview with comedian Ralphie May filmed in his dressing room just a few months before he passed away. You know what my thought about this, Frank, is people say, well, why is it just $1? I'm like, well, listen, UFC Fight Pass is $9.95. ESPN Plus is $4.99. You know, we don't have that volume of content. So we say, look, it's $1. You're going to tip your barista at Starbucks $1 unless you're super cheap. So we figure this is a good way to support the show, and we funnel a bunch of extra content toward you guys, including just from a couple of weeks ago, we did like a whole 20-minute segment on pro wrestling with Austin for our pro wrestling fans.
Potentially could cost me a lot more than $1.
That's right. You better hope the wrong promoter doesn't subscribe to our Patreon page.
Yeah, they could. I didn't know that we were going to be putting that up for general consumption.
We don't tip you off to that.
I don't even get a cut or anything.
That's how we get the that's how we get the candid comments. And
that's like the other rule that I always have now that all the years of commentating.
Yeah,
is that if there's a mic anywhere around me, you're on air.
Assume it's on.
Yeah,
assume the thing's on.
Absolutely.
You don't want to get caught with a grabbing pussy type of expression.
No. It's like a gun. You assume the gun's loaded. You
assume the gun is loaded. You're right.
Yeah.
Treat it like it's loaded.
That's right.
Every mic, I see someone up. It could be the broadcast. The MC could be walking down, and if I see him, I'm like,
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Just
Point that gun at me. Brendan, you've been in this game quite a while before UFC. You got any good I didn't know the mic was hot stories?
No, I've been lucky. So I'm kind of like waiting for my people will ask me what's your most embarrassing moment on TV, and I just like thankfully I haven't had one yet, but also not thankfully I haven't had one yet. So like I don't know when it's coming.
I think I told you guys mine, right?
I'm not sure. Remind me.
Mine happened when I was in Australia. I was working with Sam Greco and another individual. I forgot the guy's name. He was a cool guy, but he was like the straight guy. And then me and Sam were like the color. And Greco and I started talking about the word cunt. Now, he's an Australian.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So
there they call their buddy, hey, cunt, what's up, cunt? You know what I mean? That's how they're talking and talking about different cultures. And so we go on, I'm like, oh, nah, man, in the States, man, that's them fighting words. You know what I mean? You call someone a cunt like that, you know, fuck. That's one of the magic words, you know? And we probably said cunt about 30 times in a 5-minute spiel, you know what I mean? Giving examples of the word, how we use it in different contexts. And then the production manager, because I guess to set it more, we're getting ready to do the show opening. They're like, okay, we're going to go live. You know, show turns on in like 8 minutes. So we're just sitting there and just talking, you know what I mean? Bullshit. And all of a sudden the guy comes running from outside the fucking curtain, screaming, you know what I mean? Like, the mics are open. So I guess whatever app they were showing the show on, someone had it, when they did their check, their feed check, they left it on. So we're sitting there like, so someone's mom is like trying to tell him through like, hey, you know, like people that have ordered the shit are already listening to you give a whole cunt expose.
So they already ordered it? They already paid their money? Yeah, we're good.
Well, I'll tell you
It's
what.
probably going to draw more attention. That was our plan.
But actually, we just sold a bunch more leading up to it. We don't know why everyone's wanting to order this thing now.
Hey, listen.
Keep saying it.
If that was us, we would call that Patreon premium bonus content. Throw that up for $1 a month.
$1 a month, you can hear all the secret
Sam
cunts that
Greco.
we say.
That's right. That's right. All right, Frank, and also quickly, tell everybody about that Amazon banner on the front of phoneboothfighting.com.
Well, it's one of the easiest ways to help us here at the show by clicking on phoneboothfighting.com and hitting our banner. It transports you right over to the Amazon page, and all the shopping you do from that point on, a small percentage comes back here to help us out at the show.
We appreciate that. Great way to support us, and no additional cost to you. All right, Brendan. Now, tomorrow night, as we tape ESPN Plus, which is now the exclusive home of Dana White's Contender Series Season 3, we've got a fight card coming up. And you were telling me, now, is this going to be the last one you do of this season?
Yeah, this one. Yeah, I did this will be the 5th one, so I got first 5.
Okay.
And then the rest of the summer will be Dan Hellie, I believe.
It'll be who?
Dan Hellie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How do you get your assignment? Because, I mean, it's one thing when you start with Contender Series, but that trial period obviously went well because then they started sending you to different locations, calling fight cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So how does it work now? Do you just wait for the phone to ring or?
Well, I'm a full-time UFC staff member now.
Yep.
I went full-time late last summer. So now it's like I'm kind of when I email my boss, and we're kind of in constant communication because he works on the shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he'll kind of either give me a heads up through an email and be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking, this, and this. Is that cool? And I'm usually like, yes, because I almost never can miss a show. Or
You want to be the yes guy.
Well, it's like I love doing them too. I want to work, and then there was really only one. Like I had a wedding earlier this year in March. That's why I couldn't call Wichita. But it was like I was just like, hey, I think this is like my last wedding until my son probably gets married or something like that. So, you know what I mean? No, it wasn't my wedding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's kind of like several months out. Like I know what I'm doing through the end of October. And then after that, it's like, hey, you're probably doing this one too, and then maybe this one or this one, and then I'll find out as the schedule kind of goes.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's like I'm always anxious to see where the cities are that we're going to, and then, like, where I might fit in.
Yeah.
But clearly, like, I'm the number 2 guy right now, and, like, Anik is all the pay-per-views, and then pretty much all the big ESPN shows. So, like, mine are, like, the rest. And then depending on where in the world they are, you know, Europe is John Gooden territory, and I'm the South America guy if it's on ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
And you know,
so it's really no different than somebody who has their boss call them to schedule the shifts at the diner or whatever.
Kind of.
You know, hey,
I
listen,
mean,
we're going to need you to work this weekend.
I'm available because this is my job, and so you know, it's not like I was hoping to have that Saturday off, and it's also not one of those jobs where it's like, can I work I can't work that weekend in September. I'll do the Abu Dhabi one. It's just like, no. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's very specific on who's calling what.
What about pairings? Now, do they, because it looks to me like what they do is they always seize an opportunity to try a little different. Let's see if this chemistry works compared to that chemistry and things like that. Because did you start out with Paul Felder, as I recall?
Yeah, me and Felder were the team. So it was Dan Hellie and Eve Edwards, and me and Paul Felder. We alternated the first season of the Contender Series. And then Felder was my partner, too, for my first UFC card in Fresno in December of 2017. So, yeah, like I built up a nice rapport with him, and we're about the same age, and he's from Philly. I'm from just south of Boston, so we kind of have that, Northeast cynic kind of sports fan attitude. And, yeah, but then, like, obviously then I quickly worked with Jimmy Smith, Bisping last summer in the Contender Series when he started doing it. So, like, I don't know. I always pride myself on being able to work with a lot of different people. I've had to do it over the years through a bunch of different jobs at ESPNU. It was like, all right, we're covering volleyball this weekend. So here you are with a volleyball coach that you never met before, but we got to be good on TV. Yeah. And then football and basketball. Just had a constant rotation of people.
Well, see, I think, Frank, and you've certainly done a lot of this over the years. I always think that play-by-play position is so key because we're at a point now where we've got a lot of fighters, who are showing talent for being able to do color and things like that. However, you really need a good traffic cop in that situation to be able to bring you in and out of conversations, make a signal left, signal right. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I've done many shows because all the freelance stuff I do. If I work with a guy who doesn't really know what he's doing or doesn't have a very strong presence, it kills it. Like I always tell people, like, the guy in my job can kind of be bad at his job and you can get through a show. But if the play-by-play guy sucks, the show's rough. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to watch. Someone's got to turn the volume off.
Yeah. Before I forget, Brendan, and we'll get into the Contender Series and all this kind of stuff we're going to talk about, but I have a series of, I'd say probably a top 3 phenomenon in UFC commentating that I'm trying to blow the lid off, okay? I'm trying to get to the bottom of. All right. Okay. And I'm going to pose a question to you that I have never had an opportunity to ask a UFC play-by-play analyst, but it could apply to any of them. All right? Are you ready?
I may or may not be able to answer.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. You can say no comment if you feel like it's too touchy of a subject. All right. Every time, and I mean every time without exception, and it is whoever the UFC commentator is, John Anik, Brendan, Mike Goldberg back in the day, whoever it was going to be, when fighters are introduced, right, what Bruce Buffer introduces the fighters, introducing first, and his opponent, right? And then he'll say, your referee in charge, Herb Dean. And the very first thing out of the play-by-play analyst's mouth is, Herb Dean, your referee. Now,
I have a good story on this.
You know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I know.
Because, and let me just say, the reason this pings with me, this pings with me is because on the one hand, I'm thinking, he just said that, and he always just says it. It's like a given that it's going to be a reaffirmation.
Right.
Now, the only other thought I have is that sometimes the camera stays on him for a second, so you have to say something about what the viewer is looking at. Okay, those are my theories. Okay. I turn it over to you.
So when I first got into, when I found out that I was going to be auditioning, I think, or when I found out that I got the Contender Series job a couple of years ago, that was one of the first things I noticed when I would watch fights, because I hadn't called fights before. Yeah. So I was like, but I'm good at mimicking people. Like, just I feel like I've been a good broadcaster because I've been like, okay, Jim Nance, like I've grown up wanting to do it and be like, how should it sound on TV? And then like I'm going to try to do that, but with my own kind of thing. So one of the first thoughts I had was yours. I was just like, why do they keep saying the ref? Bruce just said the ref. Yeah. Why is he saying the ref? Like literally, why? Like that's not it's not good. Then I started doing it, but I was just like, it was so ingrained in me because that's like every fight that I'd watched, as you mentioned. So I just started doing it, and never told not to by my boss or whatever. And I can't remember. I think it was earlier this year I believe it was earlier this year and not last year, but somebody on Twitter after the show, and I don't have a ton of Twitter followers, so like I usually see if somebody tweets at me or whatever, mentions me, like it's not like white noise. So somebody was just like, hey, good job on the commentary. I noticed you say the referee after. It's like, why do you do that? Why do you say the ref? It's redundant, whatever. And so I was like, I shouldn't. Like, I thought that the first time I started watching fights or was kind of training to call them, and I was just like, that's redundant. Give them something else. And then I just fell into the pattern like everybody else and never told not to, and the inertia kept it going. So what I've tried to do now, I've tried to do it less. And sometimes I'll acknowledge it like, so Herb Dean draws his first assignment of the night and blah, blah, blah. I'll try to have something on one of the fighters that I'm going to say right after the referee announcement. Like, so if you watch mine play-by-plays over the last, I don't know, maybe 3, 4 months, 3, 4, 5 months, like you'll notice I still do it out of habit. It's tough to break, but at the same time, like I don't do it out of all of them. And I have had like when I'm prepping for a fight, I'll be like, that's a pretty good quote from this fighter. I'm going to do this right after the ref announcement.
I have a theory, maybe, and I have a question too that I'm curious about. I'll go with my theory first.
I'm glad you.
Here's the thing. It doesn't even bother me.
I know.
You said it, I went,
it's just they all do.
I noticed it too.
Yeah.
See, in WWE, we have very specific, and the question we'll get to is the amount of traffic you've had in your ear compared to other jobs you've had. In WWE, there's a lot of traffic going on in your earpieces. Between producers and lead-ins and breaks, and then also you have God, Vince McMahon, in your ear to feed you lines.
Oh wow!
And so
we don't have that.
And that's you literally, could you imagine if Dana was in your ear and he was
Dana was in my ear,
and he was either laughing or going, "God damn it, why did you say that?" And you'd be like, so, and you're live with that. So here's my theory. So as the announcer, as the play-by-play guy, right, and the color guy, we're talking to the audience.
Yeah.
The ring announcer is talking to the people in the crowd. Right. And I almost feel like maybe it's a way for the play-by-play guy to reconnect the audience to what's in the ring.
Yeah, it's almost like a transition to jump back into the broadcast. Says, and
your referee is Herb Dean.
Yeah.
Now he's talking to people here.
Right.
Now you're talking to people at home.
Right.
Referee's Herb Dean. He's like, you're reiterating and now reconnecting to the scene.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to
I think there's something to that. Like, I need to have a pickup point to resume the broadcast.
Bruce wasn't really talking to the people at home. He was talking to the arena. You're talking.
But
to
like
people
for the official winner, it's like we go, and then after the winner, we're just okay, so by rear naked choke, it's this person. You know what I mean? So it's like in some ways it does. Like Bruce is such a part of the broadcast at the same time. Like we build him in obviously, and he knows it. So it's like like a lot of times it is that transition. It's like I need to pick up with something. Some of the most challenging things is like if there's a long stalemate in the action or whatever, and it's kind of like a lot of feints, whatever. And it's almost like I haven't spoken for 35 seconds and maybe neither has the color guy. And then it's just like, all right, so what do I say to start back in? Without a big punch or something like that.
It makes sense. Now, here's a fun idea that will last all of one broadcast until they tell you to stop. But how about this? How about when Bruce goes, your referee, Mike Beltran, you come up with a fun fact about the referee.
I thought of that too.
Mike Beltran has been growing his mustache for 17 years.
Right. I thought of that like something
fact.
pertinent to like, okay, if we're going to acknowledge them and it obviously matters or whatever, it's almost like, but I thought of that at the beginning, like, are there referee stats or whatever, something like that. Like, Herb Dean is his
43rd title fight.
Like, or so-and-so's had, they've called 4 early stoppages in the last 3 months. Let's do it.
Oh, interesting. But
like, you can't do that. There's no quantifiable ways to do it. So, or like, it would take forever. I guess it wouldn't take that long, but you could just be like, Herb Dean's called 3 of this guy's fights. You know what I mean? Be like, he's, if they're familiar with the fighter, it might be something.
I'm just happy he's acknowledging this, Frank, because one of my other ones
is a real thing. It's something that I thought of, and somebody else called me on it on Twitter, and I was just like, I should. So I just try to have something to where if I can be like...
Well, it's good you're candid about it. One of my other ones is that everybody who trains with American Top Team has agreed that they will all be introduced as fighting out of Coconut Creek, Florida. If you've ever noticed this, no other camp, it's not like everybody that trains at Jackson Winklejohn says from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but everybody who trains ATT, it says fighting out of Coconut Creek, Florida. I questioned Dustin Poirier about this, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. they're obviously, that is something they do not, what they have all agreed on it. And I like to think that after that interview, I'll bet Dustin Poirier texted Dan Lambert, and he's like, holy shit, they're on to us. This guy, there is a guy out there who is about to blow the lid off of this agreement, and they all clam up. They act like we don't.
It could be a pride thing. I've kind of, now that you mention it, it's just like, I've always noticed that. But I don't know. I wonder if it's something like whether it's a written or unwritten rule with that, or if you were training to be a fighter, or if you were coming up, right, and you want to make it into the UFC, especially nowadays with how big it's gotten and stuff, it's like you'd wear that as a badge of honor, wouldn't you? Like, I want to, one day, man, it'd be cool if I could fight out of Coconut Creek, Florida. There's only some great fighters that are able to do that. It's almost like if you could attach ESPN to my name growing up, that would be the best thing ever. And then it happened. It's just like, man, this is awesome. I'm working for ESPN.
I'm fine with it. I just think it's a curious agreement that has clearly been made. Now, what I like to think is that Dan Lambert has cut a side deal with the Coconut Creek Chamber of Commerce. I like to think he went over there and he's like, listen, I got an idea. All right,
put us on the map.
Yeah, Coconut Creek doesn't get a lot of national media exposure. We're about to change that.
It's like in Boca, right? Near Boca Raton.
Yeah.
It's right on the south.
Let's talk some fights, Brendan. Now that we've got the important stuff out of the way, let's talk some fights.
I like the inside baseball, the business of this as much as anything else. Nobody else wants to hear about
more
it.
Than anything else,
about it off.
More than anything else, it just tells me how like offbeat I am, because I'll think of stuff like that, and somebody's like, "Huh? No."
But people do like the ins and outs of like different things they see on TV all the time.
It's interesting, right? Yeah. All right, so Contender Series is tomorrow night, and quietly, maybe not so quietly, depending on if you're a regular viewer of that show. That show is generating some real legitimate players on the UFC roster.
Yeah.
Frank, going way back to, this gets almost to your start date, a little bit after. This was something that I had to learn about the Ultimate Fighter when it first came on, because reality shows were starting to come along. When I heard about the Ultimate Fighter, I was like, well, I wonder if this is going to be kind of gimmicky. Like, I wonder if they're going to say you get a UFC contract, but it's going to be somebody who never really shows up in the promotion. And then, of course, it turns out to be anything but that. It turns out to be this totally legitimate thing. And I think, that was one thing at the beginning of the Contender Series you had to wonder about, which is, well, will you actually see any of these guys, live on to be competitive in the UFC? And I mean, now I've lost count of how many guys we're actually seeing and ladies we're actually seeing turn up in increasingly significant ways on UFC cards.
And it's like almost the opposite. Like, they want to, but like, what helps the show and then helps the UFC then helps the show. You know what I mean? It's like if you win your contract on a Contender Series, it's like they want that to be a springboard. So I feel like there's even some prospects that they have their eye on, and they say, let's bring them into the Contender Series. We'll launch them here, get them there. Obviously, you never can tell what's going to happen, but like Sean O'Malley, before he came to the Contender Series, like, he had a viral kind of head kick spinning knockout. It's just like, okay, this kid could be something. Yeah. Let's help launch this show, whatever. So it's been a strategic kind of thing where they've not only wanted to get guys to the UFC from it, but then it helps everything if then they are busy in the UFC, you know what I mean?
Frank,
if they can be.
Do you think, you've coached Ultimate Fighter Series in the past, do you think it would have been helpful back then if, you're going to have these fighters on the teams who are like real colorful personalities and they're going to get a lot of camera time, but then you're going to have the guys who are just, maybe their personalities aren't that colorful, but they're just really good fighters. It seemed like it would have been really helpful back then if there would have been an alternative avenue like this, where it can just be like, hey, this guy is a really good fighter, we put him in a fight, everybody sees it, and we don't need to worry about his antics in the Ultimate Fighter house or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think it is a good idea, because we need those kind of guys also to be fighters. Not everybody's going to have a personality like, obviously, a Conor McGregor that you're interested in and outside, whether he's fighting or not. But we still need opponents. And so I think that a lot of times you get those guys, and I hate to tell them this, but this is the truth of the matter. They're like, I'm just here to fight. I'm all, that's awesome. You're never going to be the champ. No one's going to give a shit about you when you are, if you do become the champion. Because it takes an equal amount of personality and charisma on top of being a badass to really make a superstar. So to have those guys in there that do well on the Contender, where personality is not going to be the linchpin, where I've seen it on the flip side firsthand on the Ultimate Fighter, when you get a guy going, hey, we're going to pick this guy, and then a producer walks over to you and goes, we don't really like that guy. it was dry on the mic. The guy really, he's cookie cutter. There's nothing exciting about him. Mm-hmm. He's not that exceptional of a fighter. I mean, basically, to put it back into your hands, go, look, if he's phenomenal, then obviously that gets a pass. But if he's okay, then we're definitely going to take this guy over here who's maybe not as good, but shit, man, he's a soundbite waiting to happen. He's entertaining. He's a train wreck, whatever the case may be. So I think that it's good to have a combination of both. Because I think that at the same time, the Contender Series doesn't really prepare you to be a superstar in the UFC because it doesn't really... Are you going to be that personality that catches fire, that garners interest with social media the way it is today? Whereas The Ultimate Fighter already had that as part of the prerequisites because the producers of that show, even though they were building guys as an afterthought to be good in the UFC, their primary focus was we want ratings on our show. Yeah. You know what I mean? Regardless of...
When there's one fight per episode.
Yeah.
You need to fill...
Yeah, so I mean,
fill a TV
55
show.
minutes, or whatever, 35 minutes, 40 minutes of this
around
TV
the
show
house
is around personality.
Yeah.
So if you were a winner on that, that's why they also had guys who didn't win the show. Every time they had the card, they're also fighting on the card. That wasn't really indicative of who was a good fighter. If you look back and look at it, most of the time it was who had great personalities.
Yeah, there's several.
There'd be guys that'd be like, hey, man, he lost his very first fight. You're like, yeah, man, but people want to see him. Like, And that's the part I think sometimes that fighters at home, not as much, but a lot of guys, I remember when I was with Brock Lesnar, people go, why the fuck does Brock Lesnar get to be up there? I'm like, because he sells, assholes. You know what I mean? It'd be like Mike Tyson made a quote a long time ago. He goes, what did he say? Like, if I tell everybody I'm jerking off at Madison Square Garden, I'd sell it out. And he's absolutely right. I mean, the guy, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, if you got that kind of personality or charisma and people want to see you, you could,
At
you
the
call
end
your
of the day,
shots.
this is entertainment. And this is something I've had to remind myself. In pro wrestling, we take the art form. You take the art form seriously of mixed martial arts. I take my art form seriously. And then you have to go, oh, yeah, but at the end, it's base. It's just entertainment. Because if people aren't entertained to pay their money to come and watch you do your art form, then you're just doing it with yourself, for yourself. So you have to remember that we're here to entertain people. And yes, being the absolute best fighter is entertaining in and of itself, but also just having a big personality.
It happened. What was a t-shirt company? I forgot. That did the show. Fedor first fought in the States.
Affliction?
Affliction.
Oh, yeah.
Fedor basically, not that he did it on purpose or anything, but when they paid Fedor the kind of money they paid, they thought they were going to have this phenomenal show. When the pay-per-view buys came out, it was horrendous. Like, I mean, you can make fun of Demetrius Johnson's worst show, and guess what? It still tripled the ratings on that show. Mm-hmm. Not that Fedor wasn't, especially at that time, one of the baddest men that walked the face of the earth, but no one gave a shit. You know what I mean? Like, besides the hardcore fans of the Russians that want to follow him, or the Americans here that were fans of him, but obviously that wasn't enough to push the needle because guess what? Affliction went bankrupt. Yeah. They dropped because they're like, hey, the guy doesn't talk. He doesn't have anything.
Well, it goes to your point. He had no opponent either.
Yeah.
He had no one that they were interested in even seeing him beat up, which is the other half. Again, I made a lot of money.
Yeah, it takes two to tango, man. That's fighting world. People don't realize it takes
getting
two.
Beat up. You got to pay to see someone get beat up.
And that goes for all sports too, though, because in other sports it's blurred a little bit because it's like the NFL season's going to start and the teams are going to play their way to the championship. It's not like, hey, we're going to pick out this and this for. So the fighting world is like so different. It's like such a combination. It's like entertainment. Even though it is a sport and a legitimate sport, like entertainment's a bigger factor in it. But as a sports fan growing up, and then when I started covering sports, I'm just like, you start seeing it's just like every game. When you go into the locker room, it's just like, okay, this is their job the way my job is my job, the way everyone else's job is their job. And then you just see it's like, okay, so this is entertainment too. It's just masked in a bigger league of playoffs and whatever. But it's like, make no mistake, like Dana wants personalities and great fighters to collide. That's the best case scenario. And it's just like, well, when CBS or Fox or whoever is the Super Bowl, it's like, yes, they want Tom Brady against they want the biggest stories in the biggest media markets. Like if they have like Jaguars against the Vikings or whatever, and it's just like, and Jaguars, Cardinals, whatever. It's like that Super Bowl is just not going to be watched by as many people and with as much intrigue. It's like it goes for that in all sports. In the NCAA Final Four, it's like if it's Texas Tech against Washington in the championship game,
so
or if it's Duke against Michigan.
I was going to make a joke right there.
Bucks got
not call shots, not late hits on
the
pass interference.
Right, yeah. But I mean, if you look at all the rules of it, have gone also to make the game more entertaining. Throwing the ball into a guy in basketball and having back the guy down in the post with a jump hook. and hitting 70% of his shots is great and efficient, but it doesn't sell tickets.
Right.
It's like launching three-pointers up and down the court. If you look at all the rules of sports, because at the end of the day, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
And
there's more to compete for.
And speaking to the part that there's a narrative, I think that's the one thing that team sports will always have over the individual. It's extraordinarily hard to build a narrative over a long period of time with an individual. You know what I mean? Because look, fighting's tough.
Yeah, they turn it over.
Boxing was a little bit easier to build narratives because, you see guys have 35 fights and it's like, oh, the guy's a champ. I'm like, yeah, but he's fought 3 people in the top 10.
Right.
Everybody else he fought, like, you could have beaten their ass. You know what I mean? Like, they put a lot of tomato cans under to pad people's records where, the top level MMA shows, they don't do that. They just don't have that kind of model. And so you can get a guy like Conor. Then it's like, well, the best thing in the world is if Conor beats Khabib. Guess what? They can't control that. You know what I mean? And so those narratives get stopped more. Where I think in team sports, that's why baseball, football,
they have logos
basketball.
too.
Yeah, even if your team's not doing well, they're still playing every Sunday.
Red Sox, Yankees, you put that on the board.
There's still going to be a series going on, and there's still a narrative, whether they're doing well or doing bad. Where in fighting, you can have all the personality in the world. If you lose, you're fucked. You know what I mean? It's very hard to come back. I mean, unless you're a Conor, but I mean, look at Rousey. 2 in a row, and she's like, fuck this, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, it's harder to keep up that steamrolling effect or interest in people to garner when they're not successful at the same time.
I'll ask you this question because you're a wrestling fan too, and now you're getting into the sport. Do you think with personalities and the way MMA is, we could ever see, quote, jobbers be a part of mixed martial arts to where these guys, they have a personality and they're not there to win, but people love them so much that they keep getting work as basically the guy that
we have them already in the story. Yeah, I mean,
you call him a gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, like a Chris Lieben. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He's always a tough fight, but he has a personality. You know what I mean? Like he's interesting to put on camera. So we have those guys that are, you know what I mean? That are they're not ever going to be the champ. But I guess the word we use probably be more of a gatekeeper type, where through personality and
enhancement talent,
they bring out the better in other guys that will go on hopefully be top contenders.
In MMA, they're always that. Well, the one thing you will see in MMA is where a guy has had like 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins, and then it's like, all right, now it's time to up his challenge.
Right.
And we're going to give him a guy that if he's going to advance as we think he's going to advance, we fully expect him to win this fight. However, we expect this to be a tougher fight than anything he's ever had. Yeah. And now he's on to the next level. Now he's on to graduate studies.
I think what step down from that we'd call a journeyman type.
See, but I'm saying something different. I'm saying this guy's like, all right, this guy's 0-6. Like and the crowd just like gets behind this guy like. It's like is that
what was that?
Like he's not like he's a pretty good fighter. He just has like this guy's a 1-1.
I don't know. The guy had like 100 fights.
Rudy, like the movie Rudy, right? Like
sitting jumping out. Well, I'll tell you what, there
like
have
Rudy, right? Like it's like everyone would pay just to see this guy
see him lose,
just to lose, or just I want to be there the time he lands the lucky shot and gets the first victory. Because it could be against anybody, right?
If I continue and went to Warrior, that'll be me.
Well,
that's me and went to Warrior season 6.
Don't have those guys, I guess, because now I'm thinking about it, because
it's tough.
Wouldn't it be perfect to have CM Punk be that guy?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Because, here's a guy who, the guy went and fought. He had like 700,000 pay-per-view buys.
And he would gain so much respect if he kept getting fights and losing and said, I don't care. Like, I love this until I get a win. Because the thing with MMA that
people would still tune in to watch because of who he is.
It's really tough because once you do have a few losses under your belt, you almost have no value left.
Well,
if you're not on top or you're not a big personality, once you kind of have that, unlike, again, my wins and losses is different in pro wrestling, but it's you lose your value. And it'd be great if you could find a way to bring value to guys who are never going to be champion or necessarily win, but people just love to see them in there, the journey of maybe getting that first victory.
I don't think you're going to see that at the top level, but I'll tell you where I think you do see it, though, is in smaller regional shows, like actually going to FFC. I've seen guys announce with records at times where it'd be like, all right, this guy is 6-0 or something like that, and I'll lean over to my girlfriend and be like, all right, so this guy, probably if he wins one more fight, he's going to have bigger organizations looking at him, right? And then he'll be taking on a guy who's like 3-4, okay? Yeah. And I tell her, I'm like, all right, so this guy, depending on how this fight turns out, is going to probably have a real serious talk with himself about whether or not he continues professionally.
Yeah, he needs to go like 10-0 to like even have a chance.
Because it gets to be like the value of your car. You know, if you get too upside down on it,
I did a
thinking things
interview
through.
with Dan Ige a few, from Hawaii and stuff, and like I can't remember if it was his first fight, it was one of his early pro fights, and he's just like, I was fighting a guy who was like 10-40. You know what I mean? Like you'll see once in preparing for the Contender series when you look past it, these like this guy might be 8-2, or like they all have respectable records, whatever. And then you look at their level of competition. That's something we talk about in like the production meetings too, is just to try to figure out who's what, because a lot of it's unknown even for us, even the ones who've been studying them, because it's like the circuits are just so small, you can't know everything. And so it's like, this guy's last opponent was 3-7, and his opponent before that was 4-12. So I don't know if he's as 8-0 as this guy who's 9-1, who's beaten a UFC vet before.
It's like a math equation.
So it's like but then Ode Osborne, his level of competition wasn't great before last week, and he went out and got a finish, and he got a contract. So it's like,
and it's hard though, because I've had guys that want me to help them with their careers. Hey, can you get me in? I'm like, I'm 15-0, and I'm like, yeah, but your records of your opponent's combined record is losing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if we add all the guys, they're like, you have a combined record of 30 and 50. Like that's not going to turn any heads. You're 15-0, but not against anybody of substance. Like, you're going to need a fight against a person who someone goes, hey, this guy has a win over, or he fought so-and-so. You're like, oh, I know that guy. But when you're just fighting guys that are, 3-8, it's like no one gives a shit.
A couple of those guys at the FCC FFC.
FCC are the ones that regulate what Brendan says on the air.
FCC, do not pay the dollar on ESPN. Do not pay the dollar for the Patreon. If anyone from the FCC is listening, you don't need to subscribe to the Patreon for that dollar. But but there were a couple guys there that had it was like 50, 60 fights. Like the one guy looked like Danny Trejo. Like now, but I was like, the guy's 12-42. Like that'll do it to you.
Yeah. Let's take a look at tomorrow night's Contender Series card here. Brendan, I'll just ask you if any of these names jump out to you, or if there's anything you can tell us about them. Maybe we pull those up too while we're at it. Let's see. It looks like
start with the headliner.
Yeah, let's do that.
Is that Jordan Williams? They
Jordan
changed the bout order.
Yeah, this is going to be a middleweight attraction. Jordan Williams taking on Ramazan Kuramagomedov.
That'll be fun tomorrow.
Kuramagomedov. Yeah.
So Jordan Williams, he was on last year's Contender Series.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember him. He has type 1 diabetes.
Okay.
And like at one point was in the hospital and said, his mom was sitting next to him and he thought he was going to die. Like he was really in bad shape over something. And
type 1 is like the one you get a lot of times, like even if you're a kid and stuff like
that.
Type
1 is your body
the autoimmune disease. Yeah.
Type 2 is more like diet-oriented stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Type 1 is like your body eats your own pancreas.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. So
basically because your white blood cells.
I heard they're delicious, to be fair.
He figured. I can't remember when he found that out. He was 20 or something like that. Anyway, so he came in last year on 5 or 6 days' notice, got a third-round finish over Tim Karen. Wasn't enough to get him the contract that night, but I think since then he went out and got another win, so he's back. And he's good, man. Like on 5 days' notice, and he made the weight no problem, and then he out-cardioed the hell out of that kid last year, and he finished him in the third round. So it's like he uses like his thing as a platform to help other people with autoimmune disease, kind of one of those do whatever you can. Doctors told him you probably shouldn't fight anymore, so he stopped fighting, and then he was like his diabetes got worse because he didn't have that commitment that like he got into a depression, all that kind of between the ear stuff that can probably affect you physically as well. So he got back into it. So he's a great story. And then Ramazan trains with Mark Henry, and he's trained at Jackson Wink, so it's like one of the many, like the invasion from Dagestan. I think he's undefeated, really good. I think he's like 5-0 undefeated. He's young. He's like 23. So that's a good scrap. People are high on that Terrence McKinney.
Yeah.
Rick Little is his coach, so Sick Jitsu, Michael Chiesa, same team up in Spokane. And so like he got a new opponent too. Sean Woodson steps in on like a week's notice, just over a week's notice. But like McKinney, Rick Little was just like, there's no way this kid won't make millions of dollars, and like he's going to be a UFC champion. I mean, obviously a coach is going to say good things about his fighter, but I feel like sometimes when like Rick Little's kind of like a no nonsense guy, like he's not a promoter type, and for him to say that, and then like
How much? Let me
I
ask.
don't think people were trying to fight Terrence McKinney. I think like, I think there were some people who were like, maybe I'll try to sidestep him on.
So let me ask you a quick question about that before we move on. When we talk about these, the camps that these guys come out of, or who their head trainers are, and the level of recognition of said head trainers.
Yeah.
I mean, with the UFC, you've got you've got Sean Shelby, you've got Vic Maynard, you've got matchmakers who are smart enough and have been around this thing long enough to probably see through a lot of hype if it's empty hype. But at the same time, they've probably got long-lasting relationships that they've built up to where they know that if I hear it coming from this guy, it's going to mean more than if I hear it coming from somebody I don't know so well. How much of a factor do you think that sort of thing plays
in terms of getting prospects?
Just getting the reference. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think like anything in life, like networking and connections, it's like you might have a great fighter who's from a place that doesn't have any connections. Yeah. And it's like that doesn't mean he's not a great fighter, and it doesn't mean he might not make it there eventually.
Yeah.
But like if you are an up-and-comer at Team Alpha Male and Uriah Faber really likes you, then your name is going to be known by them if Uriah wants it to be. Because like they'll take his calls. Like he talks with Dana or Sean. Like I don't know what the relationship is with Uriah. It's just obviously he's a Hall of Famer. He's back now, and he's got the respected name where it's just like, yeah, I got this guy, man. You should find. It's not always a yes, because I've kind of gotten to know some managers or whatever, and just kind of seen the inner workings a little bit. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's not like it's a relationship where it's just like, hey, Sean, this guy, and then Sean's like, yeah, cool. It's like they still make all their own decisions. They have to do what's right, but like, I was like, when I grew up, I always wanted to be a sports broadcaster. My dad was in the business world, and then I went to college for broadcasting, and like best friend of mine who I met at college or whatever, his dad was a producer at WNBC in New York, and he wanted to also get in the news business. He was already like interning when he was in high school for these like TV stations in New York. You know what I mean? Like, so I was just like, it's like the same thing, like connections.
Yeah.
Who do you know?
WNBC.
Sorry, the TV station. The TV station.
I know. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But like same thing. Like if like Joe Buck. His dad called the Cardinals games. He grew up in a broadcasting booth. Like, so doesn't mean that there were other guys that weren't as good announcers as him, but he was calling the World Series in his 20s because of those connections. I think in any business it works that way.
That was my problem.
But like
my dad was
fighters,
in the Air Force, did nothing for me. Absolutely nothing.
And it's like it can, like if my son wants to get in broadcasting, great. He's going to be in good shape. If he wants to get into music or these other things or whatever, then it's like, I'll support him as best I can, but sorry, bud, I can't make those phone calls for you as easily as some others could.
All right. Okay, what about our feature attraction here? Christian Lawson, JJ.
So, Christian Lawson, JJ Okanovich. Yeah, that's a good one. Okanovich is out of AKA. Trains with Habib and some of his other partners and stuff like that. So he believes that he's going to outclass him. He's older, too, than Lawson, so he's been around a little bit longer. He had a long amateur career before he went pro. Lawson's like 24, but has been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 years. Both of his parents are black belts, and both still compete at like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu like masters.
I just did the math. Wait a second. You say he's 24 and he's been doing it for 20 years?
Yeah. Like his parents got him into it. Then they opened a gym and stuff like that. So he's like one of those lifers, kind of like Macy Barber. Like his story reminded me of Macy Barber. It's just like you are going to be groomed for as long as you want to do it. Whatever. So I'll be interested to see that because like Okanovich is more like got into it after high school football, wanted to compete, athletic, like really athletic, and he loves it now. But it's like then Lawson's like he had a banana split finish in his last fight. Lawson did. So it's like different level of like both your parents are black belts. Crazy. Jamal Hill, Alexander. So Alexander Popek's from Germany. So that's like let's see what Germany has. I think, and he's got like 9. He's like 9-2. Jamal Hill. I can't remember what his record is, but like prospect banger from Michigan. And then Camuela Kirk is from Peoria, Arizona. I think his parents opened a gym too. I think they opened their own gym. Originally from Hawaii, looked up to BJ Penn a lot. Like he's a lifer too. Like was wanted to be a UFC guy since he was a kid. And then Billy Quarantillo was on The Ultimate Fighter a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
He's on Team Faber. When it was Faber McGregor that season. So he's like, I fought in front of Dana before. I said I'm gonna fight in front of him again. Cool. And so 4 years later,
nice work. How far in advance do you start with this stuff? Like, in terms of getting all that background information. So is it because the fights happen on Tuesday, is Wednesday like homework day to start getting ready for the next one, or are you further ahead than that?
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out because I always had like a job where it's like if I wasn't at my job, then I wasn't working. Like when I was at ESPN, it's like there's a bit of homework you do, but for the most part, it's like I'm in studio, so I'm working tonight, whatever, and then you go home, and it's like you just pay attention, watch the games and stuff like that. And then even before that, I was at local news. It was always just like a pay attention all the time, but you work when you're at work for the most part, Now it's like when you show up at work, you better be ready, and it's a lot of it is homework. So I've just kind of started this year almost figuring out like a schedule and a routine of like, okay, this days I'm going to do this, these days I'm going to do this. So like for this one, since I didn't have a show this past Saturday, I started on this one like last week. I was able to, like, the names had been on my list, and I've kind of like made certain files and stuff, but like really over the last 3 days, just kind of like pour myself into them as like, and then kind of write it all down, whatever. Today I actually didn't have to do much because I already got it done, so I'm like looking ahead to Uruguay because that's my next UFC show. But yeah, it's like Tuesdays are the show day. Like Wednesdays I kind of take as a day off almost because it's either I'm traveling to a show or it's after a Contender series or it's midweek or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of getting into that work week flow.
Brendan with his files. He was telling me about his files when I interviewed him. I said, "You're like the J. Edgar Hoover of MMA. Like he's carrying extensive files."
I gotta back him up because if I lost it, I'd be it'd just be a lot of redoing stuff.
Yeah. You ever do like would you resort to like maybe like a wiretap or putting a tail on somebody or something if you needed to?
I don't know,
a little light on information.
No. That's like a lot of it's just a lot of internet research, and then like now that I'm getting to know managers and other fighters more, it's like I can text them or call them, and then like even in Sacramento, we had fighter meetings on Thursday. So Thursday afternoon on some fight weeks, we sit in a conference room or whatever, and the PR brings the fighters in, most like the main card fighters or whatever. We talk to them for like 10, 15 minutes or whatever, and you can get a lot out of fighters in like 10 minutes than you can in like 2 hours of like trying to find news articles and stuff. And then like after those fighter meetings were done, I was going to get a workout. I didn't feel like doing it, so I brought a book down to the pool. And then like Calvin Kattar was in the pool with Mike Rodriguez, the light heavyweight who was fighting that weekend, and then their manager Tyson Chartier. And like I'm from Massachusetts, so I've got to know those guys. So I was just like, I hung in the pool with them for like 2 hours, and then at the end I was just like, that was incredible. That's like priceless in terms of like, cool, I'm good on those guys or anyone they know. I could call them or text them or whatever. So it's just like picking that up over the years, and I'm still kind of in the process.
I like how if you're in the pool,
but I always have to have it on my Word file, like for a fight, because you don't have a computer in front of you.
Yeah. I like how, apparently even if you're in the pool, you're not safe from Brendan's research. You're over there in the pool, you think you just relax, all of a sudden you see that snorkel come up from underneath the water. Yeah. So Uruguay is going to be the next UFC card. That's August 10th, I see.
The one that I do, yeah.
What is that? Oh, that's Shevchenko, Carmouche, too.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Mike Perry, Vicente Luque.
On that one,
I keep seeing this picture of Greg Hardy getting scrolled up. You have any thoughts on Greg Hardy, Frank, fellow heavyweight? Did you see his last fight?
I didn't get to watch the last fight.
Okay.
Well, I know we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. I don't know if Brendan's allowed to be here for that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Is that all right?
I'm not allowed to sound off. Well,
that's right.
I'm not going to,
Yes,
like,
of course,
I don't know. Like, I'm not,
Remember, don't make faces either, though, because you're on video.
I know.
And by the way, you know what's
stoic?
Yeah, actually, though, you know what? Now, there is but that is the definition. People always confuse, like, journalists and commentators or analysts and commentators, and that's kind of like, that's actually a good example of that. Like
well, some people have called, they're just like, this guy Brendan stinks. Why isn't Felder there this week with Bisping?
Like, well, no, those two color guys. Exactly.
Announcer. Yeah, there are some.
I always say that's, and this was like the old thing people used to talk about with Mike Goldberg. It's like there's those two. If you're dealing with like a two-man booth, you've got the color guy is there to express opinion, and a lot of times he is there for the person who already knows what they're watching. The color, the play-by-play guy a lot of times has to constantly reset because new people are coming into this all the time.
Right.
And if you don't have somebody who can always keep one eye on basics, here's who this is, here's what they're doing, here's what they're watching,
or like teeing up the fighter on like knowing how to tee them up to speak to every person. who doesn't train or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Felder might say something, and then I just be like, "What do you mean by that?" Or just like something that I see in the fight, and I'm just like, I know Paul can speak to this, and I know that I could say it, but it sounds better coming from him, so I'll like kind of tee him up on that or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, you have to be the voice of the person who is watching, wondering that same thing, and it's like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation. The color guy isn't always going to know to set that up with that much layman's terminology, you know, and he needs somebody to direct him to do that.
And sometimes put Paul Felder on blast. I love you, Paul. But like he laughs about it now, but he's not a grappler, right? That much we know. He's a striker. Yeah. So when was it? Ian Heinisch was fighting in Rochester in May, and he did a Granby roll. Now I never wrestled in high school. My high school didn't even have a wrestling team or whatever, but Paul was just like, oh, he's doing that cartwheel defense again. He kept calling it. He's called it cartwheel defense a couple of times, and then people were like, it's called a Granby roll, and it's an actual thing. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it's just
I think I called it a cartwheel when you did it at Natural Born Killers, man. It was nice. It was quick, too.
It was actually a cartwheel in that situation.
It was a cartwhil. Oh, see, I was right then. See,
looks like an effective method.
It's great because I can actually do a cartwheel, so I got one thing I can do now.
Well, let's do this before we conclude with Brennan, because we can do this. Let's look ahead real quick to this weekend's UFC 240 main event, Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. You know, this is a fight that was supposed to happen not once but twice before, and it's finally been rescheduled after it was rescheduled because of various injuries. I actually got a chance to talk to these two guys at the press conference a couple of weeks ago about this. We'll play a quick clip of this before we get into a little bit of analysis. Here we go.
Go ahead. Yeah, question for Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. We'll start with Max. With this fight having been scheduled twice before, going back a couple of years, Max, do you feel like you game plan for Frankie as much as you possibly can, get prepared for the fight, or has time caused you to maybe reevaluate the game plan at all?
You know, there's a great saying, you know, third time's a charm. And third time's a charm. I can't wait. You know, this guy's a legend. You know, I look forward to fighting him. You know, he might, like, we're the same person. You know, we'll fight to the death. And, you know, I don't want to fight him to the death. I don't want him to die. We probably should be friends after the fight. You know, him and his team is cool, so it's cool. I'm excited.
Frankie, could I ask you that same question as far as the game plan goes?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been training for Max for 2 years, and every time he fights, I got to re-switch it up because he seems to be getting better. So yeah, I feel like this is the most fresh one, and that's the one we're going with.
Question for Daniel Cormier.
So I'll pose
Max
this.
did a great job at not answering your question.
Yeah, absolutely. They do that sometimes. They do that. So I'll pose this question to the panel then. You know, looking at this, you've got two fighters who, despite the fact that they're the better part, I think, of like 10 years apart in age, their experience level is relatively the same. Frankie Edgar is going to be a smaller fighter in stature than Max Holloway, but you know, the thing that Frankie always brings to a fight is pressure, and that's something that Max Holloway doesn't always necessarily do. You know, he's more of a striker. He can actually step on the gas as the fight progresses, which a lot of times you see guys go the opposite way, you know, where they start to gas out. But with Frankie, you don't get those first couple of rounds to sort of feel each other out a lot of times. I mean, the guy's cardio just a lot of times seems to know no bounds. So thoughts there. Do you think that, well, I'll ask you first, Frank, do you think pressure from Frankie Edgar could make a big difference with Max Holloway?
I think actually the biggest difference, well, it depends, honestly. I know how Edgar's going to fight, combinations, angles coming forward, and always usually ending his combinations with a takedown. Stylistically, if Max Holloway comes forward and tries to be aggressive and fight kind of like how he fought against Aldo, he gets taken down quite a bit. And I think that he's going to have a hard time submitting Edgar. So if I see Holloway coming forward, I'm betting on Edgar to win because of the takedowns. I don't think Holloway can stop the continuous takedown attempts from Edgar. Edgar's really good at them. On the switch side, the thing that always kills Edgar is reach. And if you've seen fights where he's had a hard time with is when guys establish a perimeter, move backwards, or they'll do enough to attack to land shots, but as he comes forward, he has to do a lot to cover that distance safely. He does well with his angles and head movements and hand combinations, but he's always has such a short reach that he has to do all this extra, technical, endeavors to get in on you. If you come towards him, you make his job a lot easier. If he just stands his ground, if Max can sit back and pick away at him with jabs and long distance type of attacks, I think that's a much more difficult fight for Edgar to win.
Yeah.
You like Frankie?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because Mike Chiesa was saying that he likes Frankie, and then we're about to do our gambling show tomorrow, our betting show, and the Vegas sharp Yanni, who's really plugged in, he likes Frankie too.
Yeah.
Is he the underdog in this fight?
Yeah, he's like
Plus
a big
300.
underdog.
Oh, a big one. Is
Yeah.
he really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Max is like -4, -450, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think that they looked at the fact
I just think it's it.
Max
but
has 2
you're
wins
not-
over Jose.
Yeah.
And destroyed him in their second one.
Frankie lost both.
Edgar's lost both fights.
Yeah.
But I think that's also, too, people got to look at styles. Jose Aldo is extremely hard to take down. He has one of the best takedown defenses in his weight class, right? And he has a phenomenal jab. So now he has a good long-distance weapon, and he's doing it against a taller guy, and he doesn't have to move forward. Aldo kind of just established his ground. If you watch, he just kind of fought backward. Did not going backwards as much as like a Demetrius Johnson or an Anderson Silva had in their day, but he would sit there, establish distance, and then boom, hit him with a jab and step back. And if Edgar got too aggressive coming forward, boom, hit him with a right hand, step off. And every time Edgar shot, okay, turn the corner and almost Olay, get the fuck, get out of here, and stayed away from it. I don't know if Max Holloway's personality is programmed to do that.
to stay away.
To stay away. I think Max is a fighter. And I think so much so that sometimes it actually works against you. So when his corner is going to probably tell him, hey, let's use our range, let's use our distance. All of a sudden the third round comes in and all of a sudden this kid goes, I'm Max Holloway. I'm going to fucking do what I do. Raise the tempo, come forward, fucking just and bring pain. He's going to get out wrestled. He's going to walk. You can't walk into a guy who has a better takedown than you do. And if your takedown defense can't nullify his shots. And I think that's what the fight, really that is the element I think this fight's going to come down to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Brendan?
I just think it's interesting how many people are picking like those 3 guys that I mentioned, but like especially like in your case, Frank, and then like in Chiesa's case, like they're not picking it from a Vegas perspective.
Yeah.
They're just like fighters who see the fight going a certain way, and like
just
Chiesa's
X's
the
and
same
O's,
thing,
yeah.
right? And then like the Vegas guy is just like I can't lay -400 on Max in this spot. Like he's all about math and long term. I don't know, man. I'm not as much of an expert to pick it apart. Like you look at them stand next to each other, and it's tough to imagine. Max can't handle it, but like you said, like if his mindset is to just go forward, and then like I was trying to look too about like comps for who's Frankie has fought that like kind of can measure up, and it's like the only one really is he's going to be the shorter guy like a lot of times, but Yair Rodriguez, I guess like a more of a lengthy striker, and he just wrestled him and he just ground and pounded him.
I mean, that's the funny
Doctor
thing.
stoppage.
And
Just
Holloway-
closes off. Like I don't know if he's going to do that to Max. Is
well,
really
and
good, but-
Holloway's defense for ground is that I'm dangerous if you take me down.
yeah.
Right, that's kind of the thing.
We just
They-
haven't seen it in a long time.
Right, so if you take me down, he has great guillotine, great darce. He can rotate on his back. He'll throw up triangles, arm bars, and then he's attacking from the bottom and he can get up. It's like, that's great. But all things given, if 2 guys are of equal ability on the ground, I'm betting on the guy on top. That's just the way it works in MMA. This isn't jiu-jitsu. If you have a gi on, then being on bottom is not the worst thing. Pulling guard, there's some advantages that I can point at why guys pull guard, because it's like, well, I got all my limbs free. You can't punch me in the face.
Yeah.
You only have 2 arms to work with now. I mean, especially now with the rules with footlocks, shit. There's some, I'm not convinced that being on top in a jiu-jitsu match is necessarily the end-all be-all. In a fight, it absolutely is the only. If we're both comparable to each other skill-wise, then the guy on top, his weight's on top, and we can hit. I can deliver a much more vicious shot from the top than you can from the bottom. And then now, so it's like, and then as the fight wears on, and this is from a guy who I love submissions. I have a harder time submitting people the sweatier we get. I mean, sweat, blood gets involved. I grab the back of your elbow to pull up an arm bar, and all of a sudden now all you did was this, and now that 2 inches that you pulled your arm out just took away enough leverage that I can't hurt you. We're fresh, maybe not so, but Edgar's ability to be on top. I mean, the guy's a black belt in jiu-jitsu too. You know what I mean? Like the guy trains over there on the east side. He knows what he's doing from that position. So that being said, if he's on top and constantly putting Max there, it's one, it looks good to the judges. It's frustrating. Then Max can't swing and tee off the way he wants to, because now he's half-heartedly looking into stopping a shot instead of just going full forward. Because that's one thing that's always helped him with his stand-up before, is that he don't care if you take him down.
Right.
He'll just, I'm going to throw. If you take me down, you're just going to open up a whole other can of worms. This is a situation where it's like, man, Edgar has a good pace of work. He's busy, and he throws a lot of elbows from there. The fight could get real bloody real soon, and then that's the thing that people don't realize. As a fighter, I don't care who you are. I've never met a fighter who doesn't get a sense of urgency when blood's dripping down your face. Because in the back of our minds, we all know, fuck, that doctor could step in here and change the course of my career in a second. So as you start bleeding, not that you're panicking, but you're stressed out. There's a sense of like, okay, and guess what? Anytime I add urgency or stress to you, I change your style just a little bit. I take something away, I might add something else, but it's not, I'm not the same fighter, because now I've added a factor that is distracting my mind a little bit, going, shit, how bad was that cut? Could I take another elbow there? Maybe, okay, next time he takes me down, I'm not going to go for arm bars. I'm just going to do double overhooks and try to maybe control some of his strikes. Well, shit, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, now, see, look, it's changing. And so it all starts with the fact that Edgar is phenomenal, if not one of the best in the world to watch, at how to throw a hand combination, kick combination, to end it with a takedown. Like, his ability to flow from striking art to grappling art is something that I watch to learn from and study. I mean, obviously as a heavyweight, I'm like, well, I can't, those angles aren't going to work for me because of strength to weight ratios and different factors that contribute to difference of size of athletes, why they move differently. But as far as some of the techniques and transitions, like there's somebody, if they ever make a textbook on MMA, he has the chapter on transitioning from strikes to takedowns. He just really has it down.
Frankie hasn't fought in 15 months, had like torn biceps, so I don't know. That's
a little
something.
older.
And then Max just went 5 rounds and got hit a bunch against Poirier too. That was like 3 months ago. It seems a lot longer ago than it was, but it's like,
it's true.
And of course, like they'll say none of that's a factor. I don't know.
That's
if
all
that's
a factor.
No, it's a good point.
And the fact that, and another thing too is, I don't think the way that, for example, again, common opponent, everybody go, Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo's, his jab was a lot of his defense. His ability to step back and rip leg kicks really threw Edgar off. Didn't throw him off, but
he didn't throw any leg kicks against Max the first time. Aldo.
No, not at all.
Yeah. It was like he had a different fighter.
Yeah. It seemed like that fight against Max, he was really on Aldo's part. I don't know what was going on in his personal life, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out something was up. You know what I mean? And that contributes to a fighter. Something's going on, because he just seemed mentally out of it. The second fight against Edgar, I even picked Edgar to beat him. I'm like, well, if that same guy that showed up against Max shows up against Edgar, he mentally looks like he's just showing up for a paycheck against Max, in my opinion. It was like, that's not the Jose Aldo that I'm used to seeing. That wasn't his best performance by any stretch of the imagination. And then he showed up a really game on, laser sharp against Edgar in their second fight. I was actually really impressed with him. In fact, I thought he won the second fight. The first fight he had with Edgar, I actually thought that Jose didn't win that one. I thought that Edgar had done enough in rounds 3, 4, and 5 to garner a decision.
Good stuff.
That was the last time Frankie Edgar was an underdog. It was the first one against Aldo, 2013.
Oh, wow.
There you go. See, there's a solid stat.
Yeah,
Nicely done there, Brendan.
I like that.
Even when he's not calling.
You caught me in preparation for a lot of different things.
Even when he's not calling that particular card, he's got.
I'm hosting the gambling show.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before Brendan gets out here, and thanks again for the time, man. I hope you had a good time. We got to do this again.
This is awesome.
Okay, please do it
close
again with
to the
us.
building, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to my schedule. I usually go in on Mondays. So,
all right.
Whatever.
Well, let's tell everybody about your podcast, because Brendan's starting his own podcast. You're just a couple episodes in, right?
I've done 10.
Okay.
It's called Fits in a Fighter, and it's one-on-one interviews with a UFC fighter. So I sit down with them, and it's like It's not about their last fight, what's coming up. It's like, I'm like, where are you from? We start at the beginning. We go timeline, like, through their lives with all the biggest things. I learned at ESPN, I always talk about this. I took a 3-day course. They had this guy that worked for ESPN at the time, and he basically taught you how to interview. Right? It was like 3 days, 9 to 5 in a conference room. And I was just like, this is going to be way too long or way too much, boring, whatever. And the guy, it was fascinating. It was the best 3 days of my career. It totally changed the game. And then my career kind of went from studio hosting highlights into play-by-play, so like away from the interviewing side of things. I wish I had it like when I was working for like news stations. But I was like, if people were like, what's your dream job? I would have told them like, well, like I have some of it, calling the play-by-play is amazing. And then it'd be like an interview show, like like David Faraday on the Golf Channel or whatever. You sit down with a high-profile person and you get a lot out of them if you know how to ask the right questions. I feel like I do now. So I was just like, let me just start a podcast, because it turns out you don't need much to start a podcast. You need
That's
a
right.
Computer and internet.
That's
few
right.
dollars.
I got to get out of here too. So I found the best question that I ask people before I'm trying to get something out of them, interview them, is if they like cannabis. And if they say yes, then usually the next hour
Then you're
really
good.
get in depth.
It opens up a whole thing.
Information.
Speaking of drugs, though, so like my
Yeah.
last episode of my podcast was with Jared Gordon, who's dealt with like he was an addict, heroin, needles, crazy stories for like
Maybe
an
I'll
hour
start
full.
the interview with that question.
Right, but and like he was a sexual assault victim when he was 9. His father's business burned down in New York City, killed 3 firefighters on Father's Day one time. Like this kid's journey has been ridiculous. Then he got into drugs, been in and out of rehab. He was like sober, but then he got hurt in a fight, and they needed to give him morphine for like a long time. So he was just like, I knew I was screwed. I got back. So so it's like some of the fighters, man, they're like I should have you on sometime. You guys all have crazy stories. I think when you do what you do for a living, it's just like
you're not usually a well-adjusted human being.
well, it's just like, but even still, plenty are, or you're like a lot smarter than like some people would give you credit for, and then like your journeys on where you've taken and like the stories and stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've done some fun episodes, and I'm gonna keep doing them as long as I can.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's called Fitz and a Fighter.
Fitz and a Fighter.
Fitz and a Fighter. I like the alliteration. Always
Yeah,
a
there
fan
you
of
go.
the alliteration. That's why we went with phone booth fighting.
There you
by
go,
the
phone
way.
booth fighting.
Yeah, I like alliteration. So people can get that in iTunes, wherever they
iTunes
grab their podcasts.
podcasts. Yep. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Brendan Fitz TV, and I usually have links to it on there and stuff. Little clips.
Awesome.
Little ingestible clips.
All right. Hey, and you know what? Just like we ask you guys to do with us, get on there and you check out the podcast. You like it, give Brendan a 5-star rating on iTunes.
Oh, yeah.
That helps.
I asked for
That's
that,
a big
too.
one. That's
Yeah.
a big one. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you guys doing that for us, too. All right, Brendan. Well, we'll let you get back to whatever deep research you're
man, it was
doing.
awesome.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of
come
fun,
back.
right?
All right.
Absolutely. Let's do it again
more.
soon.
All right. Hey, good to meet you.
UFC commentator Brendan Fitzgerald with us here on Phone Booth Fighting.
You smoke cannabis?
Awesome.